Loud. All right, we're here. Fully convinced. We're on lesson five. Let's open with a word of prayer. Lord, the heavens declare your glory. Your voice goes out through all the earth, through what you've made and revealed within us. Teach us in this hour as we look into the reason why we believe to give an answer for the hope that's within us. Um, Equip us, Lord, to think your thoughts after you, to refute the gainsayers and those who despise what you've revealed. We ask all this in Christ's name. Amen. Okay. Well, welcome, guys. So I'm going to share my screen. We'll do a quick review. Let me get to the Zoom, say share. I've got the study guide on one side, share desktop. Perfecto. All right. So let me just do a quick recap where we're at. We're on lesson five. We started out with an intro to apologetics. We defined it. We talked about the acronym ASMG. We have a humble, bold attitude. The starting point is the revelation of God. That is the Bible, the scriptures. Our method in this Vantillian Bonson presuppositional apologetic is one of indirect comparison. So we don't just jump right in and just start disputing facts. We want to know what is your philosophy of fact and talk about a worldview. And we do an indirect comparison, worldview versus worldview. And the goal was unconditional surrender to the Lordship of Christ. We did an intro to philosophy in week two, questions 9 through 17. We defined what a worldview was, a network of presuppositions, something that we hold before the facts of experience. They're not verified by science. They're held prior to experience. We define the Christian philosophy of life, which includes the Christian metaphysic, that there's a creator and a creation. So we're dualists. It's twofold. We have a Christian epistemology. That is, we begin with revelation. Um, we have a Christian ethic, which is probably the easiest of the three planks in the philosophical network to understand because everybody understands what right and wrong, or at least the concept of an ethic is. Then we got into the tools, the philosophical tools in lesson three, lesson four, and we're going to finish that today. We talked about presuppositions, predication, individuation. We talked about knowledge being a justified true belief. So it's one thing to believe something or to have faith in something. What is it to know something? And from Plato on, using the definition of justified true belief, we said you can have a belief which you affirm, and it would be true because it corresponded to reality. And lastly, in order for it to elevate to the level of knowledge, you also had to have a justification. So I think the analogy I used or the example, you could believe that you could believe Mount Rushmore was in California, but you couldn't know it because it's in fact in South Dakota. And then the justification would be the evidence for it being there. In lesson four, we talked about types of reasoning, schools of thought, the laws of logic, inductive and deductive, inductive arguing from general to particular, and deductive arguing from a particular to a general. And now we're going to begin with question 57. And we're going to look at this will be fun. I think last week was probably the valley in the study. You know, there's peaks and valleys as you go through it. What's exciting, what's not. We were dealing with, the schools of thought, and so that can maybe be a little dry, but it's actually valuable because as you engage with people, you start to recognize where they're coming from, and these are all launch points into a study of philosophy where you can go much deeper. We're just brushing over this with an intro. And so today, we're going to look at informal fallacies and beginning with question 57. What is a fallacy? A fallacy is an error in reasoning or a mistake in inference. Very simple definition. Were you guys able to read through this section for lesson five and familiarize yourself with some of these fallacies?
Yeah, I actually read, let's see, I read all the way up to I finished it, the Catechism. So I haven't
Oh,
read it
right.
recently, but I read it on a plane flight, so that was helpful.
Okay, very good. How about you, Hamilton? Were you able to?
Yeah, when I not recently, but when I read it through, I went through it.
Okay, very good. So then let's spend some time. I'll zoom in here because we're sharing the screen. What are common fallacies encountered in apologetics? These are just the list that I adduced based on my experience. Aristotle, in his work Sophistical Refutations, has 13 fallacies that he catalogs. There's been a ton since then. Many of them appear under different labels. The ones I encounter are the straw man fallacy, the naturalistic fallacy, the fallacy of reification, which is not very common in terms of wording. Most people don't know what reification or to reify is. We'll talk about that. The fallacy of composition, which is incredibly popular. Um, the fallacy of hasty generalization, the ad hominem
Oh
fallacy.
yeah.
Up, comment there. What's that? Do you have something, Tristan?
I didn't say
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't say anything. I
Oh,
just said fallacy of composition I'm very familiar with that one.
yeah, okay, yeah. Um, the false dilemma fallacy, the fallacy of begging the question, and lastly, the fallacious appeal to authority. So again, there are more. These are real common. So let's begin with the straw man. Have you ever heard of the straw man fallacy?
Yes.
Yeah. So a straw man
Yeah.
fallacy is where you represent your opponent's position with an artificial position. So it doesn't actually represent what your opponent believes. It's a distortion that you attack and knock down. And so that's why they call it a straw man, because a man made of straw is easy to knock over. And we'll read the definition. The straw man fallacy is when one represents his opponent's position in an exaggerated or more extreme manner than is justified by what was actually asserted. If you listen to the Does God Exist debate between Edward Tabash and Dr. Greg Bonson, Tabash used this fallacy quite a bit. He would frequently engage in it, attributing caricatures of Jehovah, such as the man in the book of Numbers in chapter 15. He was executing it as Mr. Tabash said, oh, yeah, you got God killed him for just picking up some sticks, right? So that's the exaggeration. Was he just picking up sticks? Did the Bible say, thou shalt not pick up sticks? And God's just this arbitrary, vindictive, irrational judge who punishes a man for doing something as tame as picking up some sticks on the Sabbath. Dr. Bonson corrected the distortion, showing that the rebel knew the punishment for disobedience and that by violating the commandment on the Sabbath, he was defying God, as it were, to his face.
Yeah.
The key there was
Well,
the Sabbath disobedience.
it's interesting because like people do that a lot where like, oh, but it's just this, right? So they're
Mhm.
arbitrarily changing the standard by saying, oh, but that's just pornography or whatever, right? Or that's just picking up sticks. They belittle the law of God
Yeah.
arbitrarily, and they have no authority to do that. But they just, they like to make it sound it's their version of reductio ad absurdum or whatever, but
Uh-huh.
it's false, right? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's very common. I'm gonna erect an artificial position in like a football tackle. I'm gonna run with full speed and knock it over and then declare victory when you haven't touched your opponent's position because you're arguing against something that's an artificial representation of it. So that's pretty easy to spot, right? And I've heard it said that a good debate protocol would be to restate your opponent's position in a way that your opponent would say, yeah, that's an accurate representation of what I believe. In other words, to get them
Mm.
to admit that. And then you take that position on. So you don't proceed until you can restate their position in a way that they would affirm it. Um, Fun thing about Greg being such an accomplished debater that he was and a philosopher, many times in debate, he would dismantle his opponent based on their position. And then he would go on to say, your position is much stronger if you add this premise or proceed in this way. And then he would destroy that position. So that's one of being obedient to the ninth commandment, not lying, not distorting someone's beliefs, but representing them accurately. And that's critical to not engage in as a Christian, and number two, to be able to recognize it when it's occurring. Number 60, what is the naturalistic fallacy? This is when you argue from what is the case to what ought to be the case. So you argue from a description to a prescription. And you can compare this with question 109 on appetition. It's a form of being arbitrary. Appetition is your appetite, what it is you desire. So when you argue from desire to ought, from here's a description of what I believe, and this is what ought to be believed, that's a naturalistic fallacy. You're moving from is to ought. Okay. Um, When individuals defend same-sex attraction, or a man believes he's a woman, transgenderism, these claims are based on their desires, and they're committing the naturalistic fallacy. They're saying, I feel this desire, therefore this desire ought to be right. Have you guys encountered that?
Yes.
It's very common.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
Yeah, especially, I mean, I'm most concerned about the stuff in the church, but like Arminians, for example, you know, they want the free will in their form of, to be comfortable with sovereignty.
yep.
So like that's an example of like I desire some belief. It doesn't have to be transgenderism, just whatever belief is
Yeah.
your pet belief. It comes
Right.
up all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I desire something, therefore I'm morally justified to have it. The counter to that is says who? Confucius says one thing, Buddha says something other. How can one man's ethical claim negate another man's claim? Like Tristan, if you and I are in a dispute and we disagree, but we're both materialists, believing in Darwinian gradualism that we just arose from lower life forms, we'd have to ask, how do we break this tie, you and I disputing? Because you arose from matter and I arose from matter. We're both natural, so we don't have, nobody can pull rank,
Right.
right?
And I
We,
think that's interesting because I remember when I was evangelizing one time on the streets, I had a friend, who's a little more into that. So I tried it out for a while, and this one guy was like talking about right and wrong, basically ethics, right?
hmm
And it came to the conversation of like, well, I was trying to explain, well, okay, we're all on the same level. We're all humans, right? So there has to be like we're all in this box of the earth, and someone has to be outside of that and assert authority into that for us to know what's right.
Yeah.
But ultimately what you're talking about, it comes up where what you just said, justified true belief, we can have true beliefs that aren't justified. So I think the
hmm
conversation with someone who's a skeptic or an unbeliever could easily go to what's a proper justification of a true belief, right? And
hmm
then like see what where their mind goes, because that could be an inroad to a good conversation about
hmm
like how do we determine this? Because like a
Yeah.
Christian, we have that, but
Yeah.
someone else doesn't.
I mean, consider the, all the hotly disputed exchanges about abortion, right? You got the Christian arguing for um, life at conception. You've got the various forms of skeptic who are saying, no, it's not until, X weeks, or it's only applies to sentient life. And you just want to ask, okay, well, where does the authority come from? That's your opinion, right? The question is one of authority. Who put you in charge? When did you get the prerogative to dictate for the rest of us when life begins and when to define it? So it's an issue of authority. And I'll use this phrase many times. I'll just say, since nobody put you in charge, all your ethical demands are arbitrary assertions. I say that all the time. Like, I'm watching somebody argue for something. I'm just like, where's the authority? You? Are you making an announcement? I'll say. Are you announcing the truth? Who gave you the authority to announce what's true, right, wrong for everybody else? It's completely arbitrary. Arbitrary comes from the Latin arbitus, which means supreme ruler or a judge. That's what arbitrary is. It's a judgment. So I'm using my will and I'm making a judgment. But we're asking, in order for you to make the judgment, what's the evidence? You have to provide a foundation for your judgment. You can't just assert it on your own say so, because you have no more authority than anybody else. The Marquis de Sade, that's where we get our word sadism, people that enjoy inflicting pain on other people. The Marquis de Sade, sadism. He enjoyed torturing women. It gave him pleasure. What about the women? Perhaps they enjoyed receiving that torture. Maybe they were masochists. For somebody to say he can't do that or they shouldn't enjoy that, you'd have to ask, by what standard? It's just arbitrary. So that's another one to look out for. This one is fun. Question 61. What is the fallacy of reification? Have either of you ever heard of reification?
No, but I've heard of hyperbole.
Okay.
I,
Well,
I don't that's not I know that's kind of an off one, but like I've just seen it's interesting because like you said, applying concrete characteristics to an abstract entity, right? So,
mhm,
like you'll see books in literary form add like human characteristics or certain concrete characteristics to things that don't have that, like a plant or something
mhm,
else, right? And it
mhm.
made me think about that when I was seeing this because some people actually believe this way with reification, right? Like they believe in fantasy, basically.
If you take something that's inanimate and you attribute personality to it, something concrete like a personality, like which includes a will, that's to reify matter. You'll see it with evolutionists all the time. As it says here, a common instance of the fallacy of reification is when materialists and proponents of evolution will say things like, quote, nature or evolution designed us this way. Have you ever heard somebody say that? Nature or evolution just designed us this way?
Hmm.
Yeah, you heard that, of course. Well, guess what? Evolution's not a person. Evolution doesn't decide things. It has no personality. It's impersonal. Okay. So to say, or Mother Nature, that's a fallacy of reification. So when people attribute concrete characteristics like personality and volition to inanimate objects, they're guilty of the fallacy of reification. It's a slip, as I say, by the unbeliever testifying to their suppressed knowledge of God. Hold them accountable. This is great. We can envision a brick, so picture a brick becoming part of a wall or perhaps a castle. But would you ever expect something where a brick learns that it's a brick or knows that it's a brick, right? For a brick to become self-conscious would be reification. A brick is an inanimate object.
And I gotta correct something.
Oh, you're breaking up. You there, Tristan?
I think this sounds a
There you go.
little delayed here. Can you hear me?
You're breaking up. You're talking underwater. Try again while he's
Oh
reconnecting.
man. Okay.
Oh, there. I
Um,
think I got you.
any better now?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, can you hear me in real time? Okay. So
Yep.
I meant anthropomorphism, by the way.
Okay.
Reification reminds me of anthropomorphism.
Yeah, it
I
is.
said hyperbole just without thinking very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you could anthropomorphize, which is to attribute human characteristics to something that's not human, or you could attribute, when God was sorry that he made man, um, you know, is God really sorry if he's planned everything from the end to the beginning? Uh, that can be an anthropomorphism of God revealing himself like a human who repents. Right? God has no reason to repent of anything because he doesn't sin. So these are ways of him identifying with humanity. Um, I like this line from Aristotle. He once said, "Nothing is what rocks dream about." Yeah, rocks don't have personality. All right, let's do the next one. The fallacy of composition. This is a great one. In fact, this is probably, if you study apologetics, very applicable. So the fallacy of composition is when you attribute what's true of a part to be true of the whole. Example, each Lego that built a replica of the Empire State Building weighs 1 ounce. Therefore, the entire replica of the Empire State Building weighs 1 ounce. When you state it like that, you go, yeah, that's fallacious. This is the fallacy of composition. And actually, a number of the traditional arguments for God's existence, which we'll get to later, they commit that fallacy. There's another fallacy I didn't list here. It's the mirror image or the cousin of the fallacy of composition. It's the fallacy of division. What's true of the whole must be true of the part. Um, in my exchanges with Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox, they're very proud that they have one church and there's no division, which is debatable. I mean, there are three popes at one time. Uh, but the point being is, oh, because there are multiple denominations, there's no true denomination, right? You've got this division of the whole, and therefore the parts are all different. Well, as Protestants, I mean, we believe that, one gospel, one baptism, one Lord, one faith. I mean, there are many different Protestant denominations which hold certain things in common, even though they don't hold everything in common. And so to say they must be all identical in their beliefs is to commit the fallacy of division, which is the
Mhm.
reverse of the fallacy of composition.
That's interesting. Um,
Mhm.
it's funny, this fallacy of composition came up in with me in my marriage. So,
Ah.
and I'm, Hamilton, are you married?
No.
Okay. All right. So, what's funny is like things like this will come up where it's like you don't you don't clean very much, so you don't clean at all, or something along those lines. Like, or I don't see you cleaning, so you must not clean at all.
Yeah,
Right? Or it's kind of like something along these lines, or like because in this moment or this part of you, this didn't
yeah,
happen. The whole is true in this capacity of everything. Like you don't actually do any cleaning. Like that's one
yeah.
that comes up a lot with my wife. I do clean a lot, but it's funny that's my example that helps me understand that one a lot.
Yeah, that could also be the next one we study related to a hasty generalization. Um, when we get to the natural philosophy and the historical arguments, so, all effects need a cause. The universe is a complex effect, therefore, the universe needs a complex cause. That cause is God. Um, Those are versions of the fallacy of composition. I observe in this known world that I live in, I see cause, effect, cause, effect, cause, effect all around me. And then what I do is I apply what I experience within the world to the cosmos or the universe as a whole. To see that there's a cause for an effect within the world is not to say that there's only one cause for the entire thing. Okay, that would be a fallacy of composition. Let's keep going. Hasty generalization is a fallacy we commit when we generalize about an entire class of things from only one or a few members of that class. It's taking a little evidence, you never clean, I don't see you clean, from a limited sample and universalizing it. Because someone never experienced a miracle, does that mean miracles are impossible?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's probably one or the other at times.
Yeah, yeah. So
That's useful.
to say that miracles are impossible, not just improbable or rare, but to say that they're impossible, how much would you have to know? You'd have to know everything, right? That's a hasty generalization. The ad hominem fallacy. This is really common. Oops, back it down. There
Hmm.
we are. The ad hominem fallacy is an attack upon the man, a hominibus man, to the man. Rather than responding to the conclusion, a personal attack is directed at the one who defends the conclusion. Many internet atheists, in my experience, across the social media platforms, they rely on the ad hominem attack. When they encounter an argument and they don't have an answer, they just shift into ridicule and sarcasm, name
I have a question.
name calling. Yes.
Can I ask you something? Can this be the case? Like, let's say it's me that's trying to, okay, I'm in a dialogue with someone, but instead of arguing, I try to get personal and
hmm
help them see salvation in Jesus. Is that one of these?
Not necessarily. This is more about not responding to someone's argument. They present something. Instead of attacking the argument, you attack the person that made the argument. It's like this guy's teaching math and, he's
Well,
teaching,
I think
trigonometry. And we say, oh, well, he's a communist, though. So his math is invalid because I'm going to attack his character in some other area. That would be an ad
right.
hominem. Or I'm white and I'm talking to somebody of color and I'm condemning racism or something. Well, you're not black. You can't speak for us. That would be that's an ad hominem attack. You're not dealing with the argument. You're now making it personal.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's different too, because like this, like the in terms of it being a fallacy, is it's an attack upon the man. Taking an approach to the man
hmm
is different. Like if you're getting personal, that doesn't mean you're attacking them, right?
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay.
You could be going to the man and to the heart of the issue without attacking them. The
Yes.
problem is when you start making fun of their position as an atheist to like make them feel embarrassed,
Right.
basically, of being a person who disagrees with you, right? Like that's the arrogance and the non like lack of the illogical approach to arguing, right? So,
Hmm.
Correct.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, you could earn the right for an ad hominem. You've answered all these attacks. The person continues to, well, we talked about Edward Tabash and all of his characters in the debate with Bonson. At some point, you earn an ad hominem where you're refusing to engage the arguments. And because of all these personal attacks, you can return the ad hominem and go that your philosophy is it reduces to absurdity. You know, John Calvin referred to the Pope as an ape in purple. Okay, but he didn't just come out and just say that. That wasn't the beginning of his argument.
didn't send a
You
TikTok.
know? Right? He basically um, interacted with and dealt with all the idolatries and um, unbiblical religious practices and the abuses that occurred over history. And, with all that in the background, then say, yeah, he's an ape in purple is an ad hominem attack. But you can say at the conclusion, it may be justified. But you can't just come out of it and just, you're white.
Right.
You're part of the patriarchy. I dismiss whatever you say. It's like that's not engaging the argument. False dilemma. This one's fun. So the fallacy of false dilemma or false dichotomy is when you limit an assertion to only two options and ignore valid alternatives. The new atheists like Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, and Ricky Gervais. You can see Ricky Gervais do this. He's the witty comedian, um, producer of The Office, right? Real smart guy. They commit this fallacy. He would say, "Oh, well, Christians deny millions of gods. Hindus have millions of gods. Christians deny every one of those gods." So they'd say, "You Christians, you're atheists about all those Hindu gods." He says, "Atheists just go all the way and deny the God of the Bible too." Right? So there's two options. There's millions of gods or there's no God at all. That's the false dichotomy. The false dilemma is structured as P or Q, not P, therefore Q. In other words, there's millions of gods, P, or there are no gods, Q. There are not millions of gods. We'd have to ask how you know that. Not P, therefore there is no God. And I say here, first off, the atheist assumes, let me go to the top here, the truth of materialism, that only physical matter exists. Secondly, the atheist engages in a universal negation. A universal negation is when you say there is none of something, right? If you were to say God doesn't exist, you're universally negating the existence of God. So, universal negation, there can be no God or gods. Here's the question. How can a materialist limited to sense perception, your five senses, sense the non-existence of an immaterial entity? Like let's somebody disputes the existence of the soul. They say you don't
And
have a
they're an athe-
mind,
and they're an atheist. Yeah.
and they're an atheist. Yeah, you don't have a mind, you just have a brain.
That's
I
called
want
punching above
to,
their weight, right? Or
yeah, we want to know since your theory of knowledge limits you to that which you can perceive, how can you claim something you can't perceive? This is a form of unargued bias, and it excludes the possibility of the Christian position. Only the sovereign triune God of Scripture exists. Millions of gods or no God? No, Jehovah, the triune God of Scripture. These are reductio ad absurdums that I use with that argument. Number one, there are billions of women in the world that I am not married to. Therefore, I'm not married. That's false because I'm married to one woman. Example two, since counterfeit currency exists, there can be no genuine currency. I use that all the time. A variation on that, which I like, I saw somebody say was, have you ever seen a $7 a counterfeit $7 bill? And the answer is no. Why do you think nobody makes counterfeit $7 bills?
because there's no real $7 bill.
Exactly. There's no need to counterfeit it.
Counterfeit presupposes a real fit.
Mhm.
It's just
Yeah, genuine article for
using
sure.
What do you
silly wording.
what do you guys think about this? I've seen a lot of Christian apologetics against Islam propose the Islamic dilemma, which says
Yeah.
because the Quran says goes to the previous scriptures. Are you
Hmm.
familiar with that? But
Absolutely.
so if you go to the previous scriptures, the Bible doesn't testify to what the Quran says. So that's the Islamic dilemma.
Yeah, that's actually included in the catechism in section 3 on the method. We quote Deuteronomy 13, 1 through 5, which talks about future revelation and future prophets must agree
Hmm.
or comport with previous revelation. The Quran, Islam, Muhammad, They affirm the five books of Moses, the Psalms of David, and the Gospels of Jesus. Well, the five
Hmm.
books of Moses and the Gospels of Jesus contradict the Quran.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
Quran comes 5 centuries after the Bible, almost 6 centuries. So the Quran affirms the Bible rejects the Quran. That's the Islamic dilemma.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, shall we use it?
absolutely. And you use it with Mormons as well.
Right. Well, and
Future revelation must
well, it
agree with previous revelation.
but what's interesting though is I almost because when I researched Islam, I learned that Muhammad came from a mystic sect of Christianity. Like his parents and family were from a mystic Christian sect. And then he created Islam after that. And so what's interesting is I almost think of Islam as uh
Christian sect?
yeah, like a heretical Christian
Hmm.
sect.
They
So
say
it's
that.
almost yeah, well, because it's interesting because you argue with an atheist, they don't believe in God at all or whatever. That's what they say.
Right?
But with a Muslim, I think it's more like because they do believe in a God, like an all powerful God, as it were.
Right?
It's more of a correction of heresy versus attacking their presuppositions because they do have a presupposition of an all powerful God. It's just they're
Yes,
heretically believing because of their errors within that.
that's correct. So let's just bookmark. We're on page 22. Let's go to the table of contents and we'll scroll to, because I'm gonna reinforce what you just said. Let's go to here and we'll look at Christian count, the three types of worldview. So we'll zoom in. When we get down here, we'll skip the transcendent mystics and the eminent moralists. We get to Christian counterfeits. Since the Christian counterfeit religions acknowledge the Bible's authority in varying degrees, they are judged and refuted based on prior revelation. This is called polemical. Polemos is a Greek god of war. So this is um, militant theology, right? We're going to use the Bible to refute them. Their new revelations contradict prior revelation. They fail the coherence test laid down by Moses in Deuteronomy 13, 1 through 5, which is covered in question 153. Then there's three types. You got three basic worldviews. Your transcendent mystics, these Christian deconstructionists that are all mystical, the Hindus, those are transcendent mystics. They believe in a world that you can't sense. So then the question becomes, how do you know about this? It's supra-rational. Then you have the immanent moralists. They're not transcendent, they're the here and now. They know only what's here. So these are your Buddhists, your materialists, Confucianists. And so they tend to be moralists. And one of the reputations of that is there's so many of them. That's back to our previous fallacy about being arbitrary. How do you break a tie between, okay, I've got Confucius and I got Buddha, I find a conflict, who's right? How do you pull rank, right? You need something super nature to break a tie between two things that arise from nature. Now we get to the Christian counterfeits, which we're talking about. You have polytheistic perversions, so the Mormons, right? You've got man can become a god. Unitarian perversions, and we have Islam, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Judaism. They deny the Trinity. So you know, a Jew is a Christian counterfeit. They believe in the Christian worldview, but they reject the Son of Jehovah and
Right.
the Spirit, right? So we're going to
They
argue
just
according to
yeah.
the scriptures.
They just stopped believing once Jesus came. They could have been Christians if they properly believed as Jews, right?
That's right.
Well, and that was interesting though. It's a great little way to like bring home the rest of your catechism there in that connection point because it's like we've been spending so much time on presuppositional argumentation, but in many cases we're arguing against just a
Hmm.
diversion, or a divergent,
Hmm.
heretical belief that already has some of the presuppositions we have too.
What did Boston say about this?
The Christian counterfeits, Hamilton?
Hmm.
Yeah, so in one of his apologetic seminars, this features large, this coherence test. To cohere means to hold together or agree. And so when Moses, let's click on this question 153 right here. How are religions like Islam, let me zoom a bit more for you, and Mormonism refuted? One might ask, since both Islam and Mormonism have personal revelations from an all-powerful creator, now Hindus don't have a personal revelation. Brahman is God, but he's not a person who reveals. Doesn't that qualify them to be equally as authoritative as Christianity? Answer no, because they permit the Bible to refute them. Consider that Muhammad was born in 570 AD, which means the religion of Islam came more than 5 centuries after Christianity. Mormonism, founded in 1830, came about much later. Both Islam and Mormonism affirm the Bible's authority in certain respects, yet with qualifications. The Muslims will tell you that it was all corrupted, and the Mormons will do the same. It's useful to the degree that it's accurate, but they've fixed the corruptions, is the claim. For example, Islam recognizes the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of Moses, the Psalms of David, and the Gospels of Jesus. Mormons affirm the Bible as a sacred text worthy of study. The problem with both is they fail the coherence test, which is at the top of page 51, laid down by Moses in Deuteronomy 13, 1 through 5, which teaches that future revelation must agree or cohere with prior revelation. If it doesn't, then it must be rejected. By affirming the authority of the Bible, but subsequently contradicting that authority with a future revelation, the Quran, the Book of Mormon, competing religions like Islam and Mormonism are discredited by the Bible. So
Mm.
that's an internal critique based on scripture. Make sense?
Yes.
All right, let's go back
Yeah,
to
that was good.
22. Okay, great. Let's see here. Getting close. All right, the fallacy of begging the question. You guys have heard of begging the question. Hey, you're just begging the question, right? In Latin, it's titio principi. The fallacy of begging the question is where the premises of an argument assume the truth of the conclusion. Here's an example. The sun has risen in the east every day in recorded history. Therefore, the sun will rise in the east tomorrow. The premise assumes the conclusion by relying on the pattern in the past. What if one responds, very probably the sun will rise in the east in the future? That too begs the question because an appeal to probability already assumes that the future will resemble the past. For two more excellent examples, see question 94, where Bertrand Russell speaks on the inductive principle, and question 96, where Bertrand Russell again shows that Rene Descartes and his famous dictum, cogito ergo sum, we've already heard about that. I think, therefore I am, also begs the question. In Russell's critique of Descartes, it's both humbling and noteworthy to observe that brilliant philosophers such as Descartes are capable of committing simple errors in reasoning. So we're not immune to this. That's why Greg would say you want to have clean tools. That's the purpose of getting exposed to philosophical tools, to have clean tools and a sharp mind. We'll explore these other ones later in coming weeks. Here's what about this one? The fallacy of appealing to authority. The Latin is argumentum ad verecundium. So this one's nuanced for Christians. We'll explain why. The fallacy of appealing to authority is when someone cites an authority in place of evidence as a proof for their position, or they cite someone who is not an authoritative expert. For example, person A states, "This is the safest car on the market." Person B says, "How do you know that?" Person A replies, "Because a famous celebrity made the claim in a commercial advertising that car." Authorities can be and often are wrong. An effective way to refute the appeal to authority is simply to seek authoritative sources that contradict the skeptical authorities. Okay, so let's just pause right there for a second. So somebody just appeals to an authority. and that person's not a reputable voice in that category or that topic, you'd say, yeah, you know, that's the fallacy of appealing to authority. That's not evidence, right? 4 out of 5 dentists
Well,
surveyed recommended Crest toothpaste.
well, it's interesting because authority, we're generalizing authority here, right? Like when we talk about authority as Christians, we're like actual authority, but
Hmm.
the fallacy is of appealing to like non-relevant authorities, right?
Exactly. Yeah, because I mean, do we Christians have an authority? Do we appeal to an authority? Absolutely. God speaks. Nothing can be more authoritative than when God speaks, right? So we have an appeal to authority, but it's not an fallacious appeal. And as we advance through the apologetic and we learn to argue based on the impossibility of the contrary, to reject it is to destroy your entire worldview, your entire philosophy of life. You can't make sense out of anything, you can't predicate, you can't make any ethical pronouncements. That's the basis of us believing in our appeal to God's word. It's ultimate. When says, for example, when a liberal textual critic claims the majority of biblical scholars, you probably hear that if you read these higher critics. Oh, the majority of biblical scholars deny Moses authored the first 5 books of the Bible, or Paul didn't write Romans. Um, what I will do is I will cite a conservative scholar who contradicts them. So one such person, Dr. John Warwick Montgomery, who's a conservative Lutheran scholar, and he was a member of the Council on Biblical Inerrancy. He's an academic maverick. He has 11 earned degrees, 5 bachelors, 3 masters, 3 doctorates. I think he may have even got more. So I'll say, well, if we're going to use authority, Dr. Montgomery believes the Bible's inerrant, and he's got more degrees than you and your guy that you're appealing to. So I'm going to use that argument to defeat your argument. I'll just appeal to authority. Like, that's one way of doing a reduction. Um, yeah. So it's nuanced because we can use it to point out when people are making an arbitrary appeal to authority, at the same time recognizing that we ultimately make an appeal to authority, but that authority, it's not just a bare circular argument. We believe that it's transcendently true. If I don't believe it, I destroy everything. Okay. Okay, this next one's great. I think it's one of the few graphics that's in the study. So, top of page 23, let's go up there. Have you ever seen this painting?
Yes.
This is Plato on the left. This is Aristotle, his student. Remember, in the history of philosophy, you have Socrates. We don't have any of his writings. Plato was his student, and what we know about Socrates, Plato wrote. Plato's student was Aristotle, who's at right there. And then Aristotle had a famous student, Alexander the Great. So you have Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and Alexander the Great in direct succession in Western philosophy. Pretty fascinating. Plato and Aristotle are considered the two uh, systematicians, the grand philosophers. They weren't focused on just one narrow domain, but they built full philosophies. I mean, you read Aristotle and, study in ethics and botany and all manner of science. He's like the pre-Renaissance man. Um, and so in Raphael's painting in 1511, the School of Athens, it contrasts the two great systematic philosophers, Plato and his student Aristotle. Plato represents idealism, and he has one finger pointed upward, emphasizing the one. So here's Plato with his finger pointing up, and he's talking to Aristotle. And Aristotle, representing what we could call realism, not idealism, but realism, the here and now, he has 5 fingers outstretched downward, representing the many. In philosophy, you'll hear this phrase, the one and the many, the one and many problem. Is ultimate reality one? Well, if you're Plato, it is. It's up there. That's where the perfect duck is, the perfect triangle, right? The realm of the forms, the realm of the formulas and the ideals. And for Plato, he's like, no, we can't see that. That's not ultimate reality. Ultimate reality is in front of us, what we observe. So we got idealism and empiricism or realism, and this persists throughout all philosophy. Let's go to here it is, right below the picture. Tristan, you have your hand raised. Question?
Yeah, so I wanted to go quickly back to the previous one,
Uh-huh.
the previous question about the hey, you want applesauce?
The
So the
previous.
one previous, no, previous to this one, where we were
Mhm.
talking about the appeal to the authority.
Okay.
Yeah, so what that made me think of was typical political argumentation.
Mm-hmm.
Like you see the liberal media buy up actors to say like save the earth, save the planet, like
Yeah.
save the ocean.
Remember the COVID vaccine? Remember all
Uh-huh.
the late time
Mhm.
talk show hosts and their
Yep.
theatrical presentations of reasons to get vaccinated? They're using, you know, appeals, popular appeals to authority.
Yeah, like you get Tom Hanks or Brad Pitt to say something or Morgan Freeman
Mm-hmm.
about like sustainability,
Right.
and suddenly all these people who don't have a grounding in authority, like true authority,
Yep.
are at risk, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of a sleight of hand intellectually. It's like, oh, these people are successful because they're more successful than me. They must be smarter than me. Therefore, I should listen to them.
Yeah, I know they're like, oh, he's got an eight pack, so
Yeah. All right. The next one, question 69. The one and many represent two recurring themes in the history of philosophy. And we can go back to question 40, rationalism, ultimate reality. For the rationalists was mental. And then ultimate reality is the many for the empiricists, right? This is Plato and Aristotle, observed outside of the mind. So, I use the example of the ducks. I see the ducks on the pond, but I know they're ducks because there's a form called ducks somewhere. For Plato, it was up in the realm of the forms. For Aristotle, it was buried or embedded in the individual duck. But there's a one and a many. Numerous philosophical terms can be related under these two different themes, as shown in the following table. And I culled this over much time in my study of philosophy. So you have the one, which is unity, law, transcendence, universals. And then you have the many, which is diversity, freedom, immanence. Transcendence is that which is beyond my experience, immanence is that which is within what I experience. And so we get our universals and our particulars. Rationalism is the method of stopping and reflecting. It's mental. Um, Empiricism is the look and see. So this is Aristotle using sense perception.
mhm.
Now,
Naturalistic, right?
uh-huh. Deductive, we argue from general to particular based on necessity. So based on the ultimate, like all unmarried males are bachelors. That's a deductive truth. It doesn't tell me who's a bachelor, but I know that if you're not married, you're a bachelor. So I've learned this before the facts of experience. Inductive, I go look and see, and I argue from the particulars that I observe, and I make generalizations. That swan is white. That swan's white. All swans are white. Whoops, we went to Australia.
Or even like
On the
a
black
lot of
swan.
people, the women I've experienced are this way, so most women are like this, right? Or
Yeah,
all women are.
that would be
Or men.
inductive.
Yeah.
Idealism, ideas are ultimate, universals. Realism, experience is ultimate, particulars. Analytic, When something is an analytic truth, it's true by definition. That's your all unmarried males are bachelors. And a synthetic truth is one which is synthesized based on experience. So I observe things and I synthesize truth from my observations. So analytic synthetic distinction, a priori, that which is prior or before the facts of experience. So I'm reflecting before I experience anything to learn. A posteriori, I observe the facts of experience and it occurs after the facts of experience. So it's interesting that you've got a famous painting of two of the greatest philosophers ever, and the one and the many problem are depicted there in that painting. It's a fascinating thing to explore, and I've been going through Greg's history of Western philosophy through um, Descartes, Leibniz, Spinoza, Locke, Berkeley, Hume, the rationalists, the empiricists, and it's fun to see the contrast.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Um,
even the deconstructionist you've been bringing up in our feed a few times,
uh-huh.
definitely synthetic, right? Verified by experience. Totally synthetic.
Yeah, yeah, and yet some of those things they make claims that can't be verified. Like we're all part of God. Where did you observe that? Yeah, they're all over the place, but it's good to have these um, big categories and terms so you can start to see them. Okay,
Yeah,
two more.
real quick though,
Yeah.
I mean, this seems like a great schematic to kind of like organize thought and like seeing things that are happening, things that people do. I mean, how do you boil this down in a conversation though? Like, do you like listen to what someone says, make a note, and then come back to this and kind of be like, what's happening there?
What I do, Tristan, is I just have the big picture of I'll take the last two terms, a priori or a posteriori. And I'll say, when I ask somebody, how do you know that? And then I'll be looking for, do they know it prior? So they're defining it. That means they're arbitrary. And I'll just go, well, who put you in charge? How do you know that? You just defined it into existence, right? And then if it's a posteriori, after the fact, so they're doing it based on observation, then I typically will ask, I'll go deeper under that and I'll go, Um, so is the universe predictable or unpredictable? And if they're going to learn through experience, they need the universe to be predictable. That's what guarantees scientific success, so that you can learn a posteriori. I mean, think about it. Um, Prior to
Yeah.
Socrates and Plato, right? You had the tragedian poets, the Greek poets, Euripides, and they believed in fate. What happens is what God decides. Well, then you can't rely on your experience because it's arbitrary based on God's decisions. There's no order in the universe that I rely on to be consistent. So, if you don't have that and you want to be a good empiricist who learns a posteriori, then you're going to need the universe to be consistent, which is induction, right? So that's where we get the inductive principle up here in the same column, from particular to general, based on probability. But then once I know that they're going to argue based on probability from their experience in order to have scientific success, then because I know they're typically a monist, all is one, I'm going to then ask, are you free to believe that? Are you free to choose that? In other words, what about your human dignity and free will? If all matter is controlled by natural law, and you are made of matter, then you are controlled by natural law. And that means when you tell me X is true because I observed it, you didn't choose to say that. You had to say it because you're controlled mechanically by natural law. And what that does is it destroys free will. It destroys human dignity. It destroys ethical
It
accountability.
destroys outrage.
That would be ethical accountability. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, and I know you're saying it. I'm just
Why?
like the
Why?
thing that's been coming up a lot is how there are men and women who do horrible things to their kids, for example. And it's like
Mhm.
all these things, everyone then looks at God and is like, you know, why do you let this happen or whatever, or ordain it? And then I know that later in your catechism, like he has a morally sufficient reason for what he allows or ordains,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but what's interesting is you can't even be outraged with justification without believing first in a Christian God.
Exactly.
And that's the thing that's so paradoxical to Christians at times is
Hmm.
there's these great evils and God is there. He feels it more than even I do, right? Like that evil toward that child or whatever.
Right.
But but I cannot even feel outrage properly or justify why I feel that way without God existing. You know? So
Exactly.
it's a very interesting thing. Like you're left with belief regardless, but you still are left with confusion in some ways or some difficulty as a human, like looking at the situation,
Yeah,
you know?
I agree. You have to presuppose God's existence to make sense of any moral outrage. Okay, two more questions. So going through this, the philosophical tools, like when we got to fallacies, that made sense. There were, nine or 10 I put in there, and that was a good place for them. These are kind of just out of context. I didn't really know where to put them, so they're at the end of the philosophical tools. There's so much more that can be put in here. This is not a catechism on philosophy. It's a catechism on presuppositional apologetic with brief introduction to some philosophical concepts, which
It's a
I,
crash course. It's a crash
yeah,
course in like getting people up to speed on
yeah,
like the
yeah,
basics that could
yeah.
give them better ability to promote the gospel. Yeah.
Yep. And so I threw in the next two questions just because they occur historically as you read philosophy and you encounter, classical philosophy in ancient Greece, particularly Aristotle. Aristotle has four types of cause. This is actually fascinating. So let's think about it. Aristotle's four causes in order are one, there's a material cause, two, there is a formal cause, three, there's an efficient cause, and four, a teleological cause. Um, so material cause, think of matter. Formal cause, think of form. So remember, Plato's up there with his finger, the form. And then there's the matter that I'm observing here. And then there's an efficient and a teleological cause. So, by way of a chair, as an example, the four causes of a chair, wood is the material that the chair is made from. So, wood would be the material cause. And then taking the wood and shaping it into the form of a chair would be the formal cause. It has a shape. Okay. The carpenters, and let's go to the next one, next slide, top page. The carpenter's work is the efficient cause. It's actually bringing the form out of the matter into the shape. He's doing the work.
Well,
That's what
it's
makes
like
it
it's
efficient.
like the effect. Like he's the efficient in the sense of effectiveness. Like he's making it.
Yes. Yeah. And then the teleological, telos means aim or goal. So the goal of making a chair for the purpose to sit down. That's why we did the whole thing. That's the teleological cause. So those are Aristotle's four causes. And you'll hear philosophers, the reason I throw it in there, you'll hear them say, yeah, that doesn't have material adequacy or, and they're making reference to Aristotelian philosophy.
Well, are they saying that like in philosophy, is it a practice to, I guess in your conceptualizations to have all four causes addressed?
Um, no,
Because yeah, okay.
not necessarily. I'm just pointing out what Aristotle contributed in his metaphysic, that there were four causes. And that just gives you kind of a broad introduction so that when
Okay.
you hear those things, you're like, okay, yeah, Aristotle taught about four causes, and
Yeah, yeah.
again, you could dilate that one question and answer into a
Well,
volume.
I guess, but that's kind of the purpose of this, right? So like you put that in here. Why did you put it in here when it comes to your conversations in evangelical scenarios?
Um, I put it in there because Aristotle's stature in philosophy and history, the fact that the Roman Catholic Church, particularly Thomas Aquinas, in the medieval period took Aristotle's philosophy and baptized it with Christian concepts. I mean, you read Thomas Aquinas, you're reading Aristotle's philosophy.
Just
Now,
with it submitted to the Christian God, basically, or the attempting to.
yes, yep,
I see. So
yeah,
it comes up in all sorts of philosophical scenarios, and so you put it in there because it will come up and you will recognize it, basically.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's basically it. Um, Last question for the section three of philosophical tools is about this sacred secular distinction. This is another real common distinction. And when you study Renaissance philosophy and the differentiation between facts and values, faith and science, sacred faith, secular science, it's a post-Enlightenment distinction that's often referred to as the sacred secular distinction. Okay. And the sacred secular distinction is a post-Enlightenment development to divide the field of knowledge into a public sphere of scientific fact on one side and a private sphere of religious and ethical preferences on the other side. So
Yeah,
it,
it's an interesting play, right? By
Mhm.
Satan, as it were, to say, oh, these public facts are outside of God's like governance, right? And then your
Mhm.
religious beliefs about God are your little silly things that you believe separately from public facts, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's an attempt to tell people who are religious, you can believe those things on your own, on your reservation, but when you're out here in public, we deal with that which we can measure, which is observable, which is provable. These metaphysical claims about heaven and hell, a second coming, all that that cannot be observed, and therefore that should be consigned to your private, Sunday.
To your
uh,
book club.
yeah. Yeah. So it's public facts against private values. When you read Immanuel Kant, he comes after David Hume and the British empiricists, and he comes up with this distinction, which I believe is in the Catechism later, about the phenomenal versus the noumenal. The phenomenal is when you
Yep.
observe phenomena, and the noumenal is a thing in itself. And this is all about you only know what you perceive. You don't know a thing in its essence. You don't perceive a thing. He called it the Zing on Dick, the thing in itself, in its essence. So that's a that this public facts versus private values um, continues and proceeds from that mindset that just says those are verifiable. You can't know them. That's not part of the phenomena of our human experience. And so they try to
Yeah.
undermine belief in those by saying they're unprovable, right? They're
So
private religious assertions.
yeah, so for me, the question here to really put flesh on this is like this comes up is what you're saying. The catechism is indicating this is a thing that's out there and people will like present it to you in a conversation.
Right.
And it won't be stated this way, like, oh, I'm talking about the sacred secular distinction. They're going to say something that indicates they believe in this, right?
Hmm.
So how do you address this? Like, give a couple examples if you are able to.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There we go. Okay, and how do I address this when somebody is going to use this against me and say, yeah, well, that's unverifiable. You can't know it.
Right. Like, what's an example of them doing
Mhm.
that that has come up for you? Because you obviously picked this
Mhm.
because of some experiences. So,
Yeah, what I do, I tend to show them, this is again the internal critique of the presuppositional method, is I will show them that they believe in things that aren't verifiable, or they have faith commitments in their worldview. I'm gonna disabuse them of the notion that I have these unverifiable faith commitments, and they are committed to pure science and
like brute
observation.
facts, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
exactly. So I will go to logic, science, morality. I could pick any of those. I could take logic and say, Oh, so you're a logical person. You believe in the laws of logic and, rejecting contradictions. And, yeah, of course. Okay, can you prove to me the laws of logic without using the laws of logic? I'd like to see you do that, right? How do we know that the laws of logic are trustworthy without using them first? And the dirty little secret is the laws of logic have a transcendental quality. In order to attempt to deny them, you have to secretly affirm them first. Like, how would I disprove to you the laws of logic without using logic? The same is true for science. How do I prove that nature is uniform and the future is going to resemble the past without already believing it?
Right. And what you're getting at there is the concept of proving or disproving is a logical principle, right?
Yeah,
Like it's like when how can you disprove logic without using it is like your very statement indicates you have to have logic to do that, right?
yes, and what that is attacking is this false dichotomy that they have public observable knowledge, and I hold to private religious beliefs, value statements. And I'm going to show that no, you have value statements too that are private, that you didn't observe. And so it's a
Mm.
false dichotomy to say that we need to separate the field of knowledge into that which we can know and then that which we hold by faith. In fact, I go so far as to show that without faith, you couldn't know anything. So,
Right. Well, because confidence, like confideo, right? Or whatever, like
Mhm. Yeah, that's right.
you're having faith in something. Like I'm confident about this person. It's like it means you're having
Yep.
faith in them. So the the question I think of when you bring up sacred secular is what makes you believe that there's a division between sacred and secular facts or sacred and secular beliefs, right? Like if I'm talking to someone and they're indicating they think religious stuff is like separate from knowledge and
Hmm.
value facts or whatever.
Hmm.
I mean, I feel like a good question is, what authority made you believe that this division is real or necessary, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a good challenge question.
I don't think they'd be able to handle that though. I mean, like most people would just be like, "What are you talking about?" And they'd do an ad hominem back at me or something, you know?
That's why I like to reach into their worldview and show them that they believe which they claim they don't believe. I want to show them, but you have faith. You're attacking me because I have faith, but that's not optional. You too have faith. You believe that nature's uniform. Without that belief, you couldn't engage in science. You can't use science to prove that nature's uniform because the belief in science already assumes that nature is uniform. If you didn't assume it, you couldn't learn anything, right? You can't um, tell me that you experience the laws of logic to be true because you haven't experienced every logical law and every form of argumentation, right? You assume that they're true and they're very useful. It's a useful assumption. But then the law of logic, it needs a worldview. It needs a foundation. I mean, it didn't create itself, right? This would be the fallacy of reification. Laws of logic don't make anything. They're not a person. They don't choose. It's a tool of man's reason from the Christian worldview. So I like that approach. I will go into their worldview and say, this is not a debate between people with faith and people with facts. We both require faith in order to defend any fact whatsoever. This is really the Van Til approach is um, there are no brute facts. All facts are created and revealed and interpreted. Um, and so I think that's a safer way to go and a more biblical and faithful way to go. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, than to try to embrace the skeptic's challenge, to prove a faith commitment from their narrow, biased scientific viewpoint, right?
Yeah,
I'd, I'd rather go into their world and you go, I know you're a scientist, but it requires faith to do that. And then
right.
later on, you'll have, is it G.E. Moore and the logical positivist, where when you make a metaphysical statement such as hell exists and God will send the wicked there and punish them. Yeah, that's a metaphysical claim. You can't observe that. So how can you know it? Um,
Mm,
and we only know it based on revelation, but revelation itself isn't, that's something you take on faith. So the logical positivists, they'll come along and just say that metaphysical statements, that they're just nonsense. They're not, this is the push again. That's a private belief. You can have that if you want, but in the public sphere, we have to debate facts, right?
right.
And so it's one thing to say that the Chicago Cubs are a bad baseball team. It's another thing to say that the Chicago Cubs aren't even doing baseball. And when we make these metaphysical claims, the logical positivists, the skeptics, those post-Kant, they're coming along going, that's nonsensical. Doesn't even make sense. You can't even talk about it, right? It's not observable. It's not factual. Those are these a priori metaphysical beliefs that you have that you should hold in private. So that's what that is. There's an
Yeah.
apologist. Her name is Nancy Piercy. I have her book, Total Truth. She's really good on the sacred secular distinction. She spends a lot of time on it, the development of it over history, and it's quite good.
Well, that was great. Yeah.
Awesome.
I feel like another thing we can do, um, like this study guide is like such a useful thing, but it'd be fun to bring in some of these other people